my name is Byddi Lee, and I'm an Irish writer. I write all sorts of fiction. I'm not very genre specific. I have my first book was March to November. That's coming up the wrong way around, is it? And that was women's fiction. And then my next set of books was a trilogy, Rejuvenation trilogy, and that was sci-fi. So, and then at the moment, I'm writing sort of a crossover between sort of women's uplit fiction and a little bit of fantasy, and there's a historical timeline as well.
That
So,
sounds like lots of fun. Would be really great to read.
I
What inspires your writing?
think the human condition, you know, basically anything that makes you laugh, makes you cry, evokes it, it's kind of like looking at the world. When you put up a picture on Instagram and then you tweak the contrast and you tweak the saturation. I think that's really it. Like, writing is doing that for the world and the world around you.
Definitely. What drew you to writing in the first place?
Sorry.
What
I
drew
didn't
you to writing?
what
Drew you to writing in the
Well,
first?
what drew me to writing? Again, it's that idea of wanting to recreate, you know, uh, the emotions that I felt whenever I was reading, so like, for example, like, oh gosh, when you're a child and you watch ballet and you want to be a ballerina.
Yeah.
Yeah, writing was easier than getting ballet lessons.
Yeah, definitely.
I
And
don't have the body for ballet.
it won't screw up your feet as well.
Yeah.
How do you choose which character to center the story around?
Well, for my first book, I found that really difficult actually, because I originally centered the story around Molly in my first book, but it became then like an ensemble piece. It was five characters, and I went through all the different POVs. So, and I still continued to do that. I switched through them the whole way through the book. But by the time I got to the end of the book, my critiquing group were like, you know what, I think this book's really about Tracy. So she became the main character. So I had to go back in and tweak it a lot and change all that. But I suppose the main character is sort of the strongest person who has the biggest arc in the story. I think that's really it.
And who speaks out the loudest when you're writing as well, I guess too.
Well, yeah, yes and no. Like in Rejuvenation, my main character, I kind of had her as a real like goody two shoes at the beginning, and I kind of didn't like her as much as I liked her rebel sister. She has a sister who's a real rebel, so I liked the sister. The sister was real cool and more fun and just like sort of more like what I really would prefer to be. But I think really the goody two shoes side came from this very responsible older sister that I am. So that maybe there's a wee bit of that self-loathing that people always have, that you're kind of like, well, this character's based on that, but I'm not really that fond of that. But her character arc switched that around a bit anyway. So yeah.
What's your process for writing your books? Are you a pantser or a plotter?
So I think I'm definitely more of a plotter now. At the beginning, I was more of a pantser. And then I learned the hard way, having gotten to the end of a book and realized this book is about somebody else in the book. So, um, so what I do now is I do have a plot, but in an individual sort of writing session, it's pantser. You know what I mean? So, like I know roughly where I'm heading, and I like to have, whether it's a book or a play or whatever I'm writing, I like to have the end point. I know how it ends. So that informs how I start it, if you like. So that's kind of the thing, how it's set up. So then I'll write it and then I'll get critiqued and then I'll rewrite it and rewrite it again and get it edited and rewrite it. So always say I'm not really a writer, I'm a rewriter. I do dump everything out the first time.
You just need the first draft to
Yeah,
start you.
yeah. Get that first draft down, and then everything kind of builds on that. It's like the foundations for your house, you know.
What's your approach to world and character building?
Um, okay, so it's about sort of, it's nearly like a total immersion thing in that, you know, you're sitting there at your desk and you just have to see yourself on the shoulder of your character, you know, and look through the eyes of a camera, if you like, on the shoulder of your camera of your character. And because you know when you're world building as well, like I like the world I built in Rejuvenation was a very different world to the world we live in, but it was based strongly on it, you know. Likewise with my work in progress, I call it my work in progress. I have finished it. It's out. I'm submitting it out at the minute. There was two timelines in it. So one was modern day, and that was something I was very, you know, it was a world I was familiar with, and you know, I would assume most people in sort of, you know, like, well, I wouldn't say Western world, but you know, like would be familiar with that world, you know, even just through TV. And it starts off in California and it comes to Ireland. But the ancient timeline was 4,000 years ago. So it was a very specific, it was 2354 BC. And so to do that, I mean, I found out that I love researching my books. That was something. So that's part of the world building as well. Like you research and you spend so much time, and very little of that maybe makes it onto the page, but I think it does in the feel of it, you know.
Yeah.
So even probably down to your word choices, that it's subliminal things, unconscious things that you don't put that much, that you think you don't put that much thought into. So the world, this Neolithic world to me was like, I look out my window and I go, I imagine it was set here in Ireland. So it's like, imagine this without any buildings, and you know, okay, that would be all forest, and I had to there was a bit where I have my characters have to go on a mission, like on a journey, and they're being given instructions, and of course there's no evidence. There might have been written maps at the time. So again, this is all about like what we have archaeological evidence for. I wanted it to be quite close to, you know, the fact, you know, I wanted to be quite factual as far as I could be. So they had to, I decided, well, we had a very strong tradition of oral sort of rhyming and storytelling, and remembering, you know, like names even of families and places through memorizing things. So that's what I had them memorize the journey plan, like the instructions, you know. So then I had I had them go along rivers, and I took apart like the names of the rivers that we have for them now. So the Blackwater River, for example, stayed as Blackwater because ancient people would look at that river. It's a very deep river. The water looks black in it, so that's, I assumed, how it got its name. But the more local river is the Callan River, and apparently its name comes from the Irish for noisy, the noisy river. And I could see how that was, because it's very shallow in places, so it would make a lot of noise. So I just called it the noisy river. And then I looked into other place names, and I thought, right, well, that the Irish for that is, you know, and it, you know, it breaks it down. So I just gave that then, you know, because they weren't actually 4,000 years ago in Ireland, they probably weren't even speaking what we call Irish today. Like they weren't speaking Gaelic. It was pre-Celtic. So yeah, so that's what world building does. You go down these rabbit holes, like names and places and things like that, you know.
It sounds so much fun though, especially like the history side, like especially being a history buff. It's like I would love that.
Well, and it was funny because that one came from I had worked in dendrochronology, which is like tree ring analysis. And the idea for it came from, this is why the date is so specific, because we have a date for the climate changing for 9 years,
Wow.
starting at that date. And so it was that climate change back then that I wanted to document and to imagine, and you know, and get across, you know. So.
That's so cool.
Please tell publishers.
Did you have a favorite moment to write in any of your stories?
Oh gosh, yeah. When I say favorite, I suppose I must be a bit of a drama queen at heart, but it's always the big moments, you know.
Mm.
So there's one part in one of the books I don't want to give away any spoilers, so I'm not going to tell you which book it is, but there's a point where somebody is saying goodbye to somebody close to them. Now, I know that that's the last time you're going to get speaking to that person ever again, because that person's going to go off and I'm going to kill them, right? So, which is, I suppose, really killing people is my favorite part. Isn't that terrible?
I think there's some sort of like, you know, that it's going to really hit readers when you kill off a character.
Oh, you're so good, because I'm thinking, yeah, maybe it's a God syndrome or something. But yeah, no, I'm going to go with what you said. Yeah, so these characters are saying goodbye, but I know that to me it was like, oh my God, this is the last time they're going to speak to each other, and that really got me, just that moment right in that bit. Yeah.
Which of your characters do you relate to the most and why?
Ooh, who do I relate to the most? Probably Bobby from Rejuvenation, or Molly from March to November. Yeah. So, but yeah, I don't want to say too much about Molly, but yeah, I'll say it with Bobby from Rejuvenation, the older big sister, and the kind of person who was always trying to do everything right and ticking every box, and everything didn't work out as she had planned, so that was it.
I think there's always a bit of us in like characters, and as readers, we also find things that we identify in characters as well. Which is always
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like, at least with Bobby, her underlying character was very me, but Bobby was but Bobby was way smarter than I am, right? So that's another biggie. Don't write characters who are smarter than you, because you have to match their intelligence on the page. That was the challenge. So
and for stretching and helping you write better characters though. How has writing and publishing books changed the way you see yourself?
Ooh, I think really, yeah. I suppose it's been it's been a long journey, I suppose, for me. I started writing probably back in 2002, just writing for myself, just journaling and that sort of thing. And then it wasn't until 2005 that I started to even think of the book idea for March to November. And then it didn't come out until, like, I didn't sit down and start writing it until 2008, 2007, 2008. And then it didn't get published until 2014. So, that was a long time in between, and then that kind of grew, it was organic. So it kind of, while I was writing it, I was writing some short stories and that. So then the pace picked up after that. March and November came out, then the pace picked up, and I managed to write 3 books in 6 years, and the thing with the trilogy is, like, by the time you get to book 3, it nearly writes itself, especially if you know what your end point is. So and then they came out during the pandemic, which was just awful, because they begin with a disease that affects elderly people. So I was like, oh no.
I'm having to
But
write what I'm experiencing at the moment.
I know, it was just like and there was a lot of things in Rejuvenation that were relevant to, climate change and that. So there were things coming in it, and then I dropped in because I was able to do like a last minute edit, and it's set in the future. So I had them up to something like COVID 57 or something. Or COVID, I think it was COVID 32. So it was kind of just it freaked people out. Then they were like, how did you know? And it was like, well, I just had that kind of, I could just slip that into the lab just before it went to press. But yeah, so gosh, I just, yeah, that's, the books just kind of keep doing their thing.
Are there any books or authors that inspired you to become a writer?
Um, I think all of them. I mean, I love books, and it's funny. I wasn't like a book reader of like children nursery, like picture books. I mean, I don't remember being that excited about books until I read my first chapter book as such, and that was Enid Blyton. I don't know if you've heard. You're probably far too young to have heard of Enid Blyton. because she's got a really bad rep now. Like she's like, oh no, she's not PC, and all. Of course she's not PC. Like she's ancient, you know. So but the first book I ever read was Five Go to Mystery Moor, and it was, you know, these five kids, there are four kids and a dog. The dog was one of the five, you know, and there was a tomboy, and then there was the girly girl, and then there was two other, like they were cousins or brothers and sisters or whatever. And at the end of the book, I had a book hangover. You know, I missed the characters. And I was like, I want to see this on TV. I want to, you know, unfortunately, she had lots of famous five books. So I was able to, you know, write. So I'm not saying that Enid Blyton necessarily inspired my writing, but she definitely inspired my reading. And then I went on into like the, you know, like you've probably heard of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Narnia books. Yeah. So that was my next big love. Then I just ate those up, all of those books, just loved them. And the author had come from here originally, so that was kind of nice as well. There was that connection as well. So yes, C.S. Lewis. So so they would have been the big major kind of pushes towards reading. And I think then with writing each book, you kind of need to read books that are similar to it. So like from March to November, I can't remember the author's name, but it was the Divinity of Second Chances. And even things like a lot of the clubby books that were out at the time, you know, that would fit into that one. Rejuvenation, it was definitely Blake Crouch. His books, his sci-fi books were definitely a huge, you know, push. Even I tried to, you know, he writes really fast and pacey, so I was trying to emulate that as well. But my current book, which I'm sort of like calling Barren at the minute, it's because it deals with fertility topics and like sort of like laying waste to the landscape as well. So you've got this mirroring of these ideas. But it's a bit barren in terms of it's getting picked up at the minute. You know how it is. There's always that stage where you're just pushing it out and the rejections are coming in. So this is the hard part. But yeah, so they're just three very different books with three very different sort of sources of inspiration.
I think when you're a child, like you always go to like the adventure sort of fantasy one because you want to escape and like use your imagination, which is sometimes in school you're not really allowed to.
Yeah.
You don't really get to do it a lot. So yeah, I remember the famous five books, and they were
Oh, you do? Okay. Yeah.
they're in the school library. So no, that was like one of the more popular books in our library.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's good. Yeah.
What
Okay,
what
little
a
feeling variation then.
yeah. What advice would you give to a writer working on their first book?
Get a good team around you. You know, have a writing group that nurtures you. You know, I would call them my critiquing group as well because I trust them and I know that I can give them my work and that they're gonna come back with the, you know, like this is wrong and that's wrong, you need to fix it. But they're gonna help me to fix it. You know, it's not just about slamming me, you know. So yeah, so there's that trust thing there. And also go do lots of workshops and keep learning your craft and rewrite, lots of rewriting.
What's your favorite writing snack or drink if you have one?
Probably coffee. Oh, and chocolate, of course. Chocolate. Okay, so because I kind of think like I have in an ideal world, like I could just sit with a mountain of you know, Cadbury's buttons or, you know, like easy to
Yeah.
sort of pop in the mouth chocolates.
Can't go wrong with buttons.
Yeah, because like crisps don't work, you know, potato chips don't work because they're salty and you want to lick your fingers and you have to touch your keyboard. So that doesn't
That's
work. But you want something that's not gonna, you know, not gonna make you want to lick your fingers too much. So yeah, it's just something you can pop in your mouth. Yeah, chocolate works for
Do you
most
play
things.
do you play music while you write? And if so, what's your favorite music?
If I were to play, sometimes I do. I don't do it as a like as practice because I share my office space with my husband who works from home. So we have very different tastes in music. But on the rare occasions when I would play music, it's usually to write an emotive piece, you know, if I really want something very moving. So I would listen to something. So if something's sad and you know really heartrending, I would listen to Adagio for strings. Most people would know it as the music from Platoon,
Oh
the movie.
yeah.
But it's been around long before that, and I think it was actually played for JFK's funeral. Like it's like, you know, if you looked up saddest, you know, classical music, you know, that would be the thing that would come up in your Google search, you know, literally, because I did that.
And my final question is, who has been the biggest supporter of your writing?
I would have to say my husband, undoubtedly, yeah. My husband. And I've been lucky. I've had lots of supporters, but if I start naming them, then I'm going to miss somebody out. But he would definitely be my biggest one.
It's always the people closest who are the biggest supporters because they have to also deal with you the most.